The red dawn. The year was 2050. After decades of advancements in technology, humanity stood on the precipice of one of its greatest achievements, colonizing Mars. But with the accomplishment came questions, fears, and unspoken doubts. Would humanity's reach exceed its grasp? Would Mars, with its barren red soil and harsh winds, be a home or a graveyard? The first human colonists, a team of pioneers, had spent years preparing for this moment. They were engineers, scientists, astronauts, and dreamers, each driven by something greater than the desire for glory. They were driven by the hope that, one day, their children's children might look up at the red sky and call it home. The mission was called New Dawn, and they were its first light, the launch. The day of launch was unlike any other. The world watched in breathless silence as the massive spacecraft, the Astra, ascended into the sky. On board were 5 souls, 5 ordinary individuals, driven by an extraordinary vision. Among them was Eve, a young biologist with a deep connection to the Earth. She had always believed that human beings were more than just the sum of their parts, that their purpose was to spread life, to nurture it, and to protect it. Eve had known the risks. But this wasn't about Earth anymore. This was about the future. In the heart of her chest, she carried the burden of her parents' final words, "Make a difference." The gravity of those words was heavier than anything she had ever felt. For them, and for countless generations to come, she couldn't afford to fail. For Earth, for humanity. The countdown was over. The Astra soared into space, leaving Earth's atmosphere behind. As Eve stared out the window, she felt an ache, a longing to feel the soil beneath her feet once more. But she quickly pushed it aside. Mars was waiting. It was a world in need of life, a world ready for a new beginning. The arrival, months later, after a long, lonely voyage, they finally arrived on Mars. The red planet loomed before them, cold and indifferent. The landing was smooth, but the silence that followed was deafening. The crew disembarked, stepping into the alien soil, their boots crunching on the dry dust. A small American flag was planted, but it wasn't about patriotism. It was about something much bigger, about claiming the future, about building a new world for all of humanity. Eve breathed in the thin air, feeling the weight of the moment pressed down on her chest. Mars was silent, lifeless, yet in that silence, there was hope. The struggle. Days turned into weeks, and the initial excitement began to fade into the reality of survival. There were no oceans to dive into, no forests to wander through. The air was thin, the soil toxic. Every step forward felt like a battle against nature itself. The colony, which had been carefully planned and designed, began to feel like a fragile, claustrophobic cage. Eve spent most of her time in the greenhouse, where the crops they had brought with them struggled to grow in the harsh Martian conditions. She felt the weight of failure closing in around her. Every seed that failed to sprout was a blow to her spirit. She thought about Earth, the lush forests, the vibrant oceans, the skies full of clouds, and wondered if humanity had been too hasty to leave it all behind. One evening, after a long, exhausting day, Eve sat in the dim glow of the colony's lights, her face buried in her hands. The others were asleep, but the silence was unbearable. It was the first time she felt truly alone on Mars. The colony was a barren island in the vast ocean of space, and she feared that it might be their tomb, the turning point. But then, as the sun began to set behind the distant hills of Mars, Eve walked outside the colony's dome. The sky was painted with the red and orange hues of the Martian sunset, a sight unlike any she had ever seen. The air was thin and cold, but the view took her breath away, and then she heard it whispers in the wind. She stood still, listening. The wind seemed to speak to her as though it were telling her that this struggle, this pain, was not in vain. This was the beginning of something greater, something eternal. In that moment, she realized that Mars didn't need to be Earth. Mars didn't need to be an exact replica of home. It needed to be a new home, a place where human potential could unfold in ways they had never imagined. Eve looked to the horizon, where the first light of dawn was just beginning to break. It was a new dawn for Mars, for humanity, and for her own spirit. She knew what she had to do. She returned to the greenhouse with renewed purpose. She started experimenting with new ways to grow crops, using every bit of knowledge and every ounce of energy she had left. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, failures, and moments when she wanted to give up. But she didn't. She couldn't. The victory. Months passed. Slowly but surely, life began to flourish. Crops grew. Small green shoots broke through the dry, red soil. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As the first Martian vegetables were harvested, Eve looked at her team, and for the first time since their arrival, she saw hope in their eyes. Humanity wasn't just surviving on Mars, it was starting to thrive. They had created something beautiful out of nothing. The colony was no longer just a group of people waiting to see if they could make it. It had become a symbol of human strength, resilience, and the power of hope. As Eve looked out at the horizon, she saw the sun rising over the red plains of Mars, casting a golden glow across the barren landscape. The darkness was over. A new era had begun. A new world had been born. And in that moment, she knew the future was theirs. The message: to everyone on Earth, to those who dream and strive, never give up. The road will be hard, and the mountains will be high, but with every challenge, there is a chance to rise. We are the builders of the future, and though the night may be long, the dawn will come, always. The red dawn was just the beginning.